I look at Zion like not a bust, but a disappointment, who still has some runway left to change the narrative around his story. Like, we don't pay attention to the New Orleans Pelicans because of how bad they've been, but him playing 35 straight games, that's the longest mark of his career.
Everybody remembers the beginning, the hype, the explosions at the rim, the impossible athleticism, the mixtapes, the Duke season, the shoe explosion against North Carolina, the #1 pick expectations. People weren't calling Zion Williamson the next star. They were calling him the next face of basketball. And honestly, it didn't even sound crazy. At 6'6", nearly 300 pounds, Zion moved like someone created in a video game. He had the power of a center, the speed of a guard, and the bounce of prime Blake Griffin mixed with the young LeBron James. We had never seen anything like it. When the New Orleans Pelicans won the draft lottery in 2019, the NBA celebrated like they just secured the next global superstar. The league needed a new generation. LeBron was aging. Steph was entering his 30s. KD had injuries peeling up. And Zion looked like the future. But now, years later, the conversation has completely changed. Now, people ask, can Zion stay healthy? Can he stay disciplined? Will he ever reach his potential? Or is this one of the saddest declines we've ever seen from a generational talent? Because the scary part is, Zion didn't fail because he lacked talent. He may have failed because of his body, and everything around him couldn't handle the pressure of becoming a superstar. And that's what makes this story so tragic. Because when Zion actually plays, he looks unstoppable. Coming into the NBA, Zion Williamson was one of the most hyped prospects in sports history. Not just basketball history, sports history. The expectations were comparable to LeBron James. That's not an exaggeration. In high school, Zion Williamson became a viral sensation before NIL deals even existed. His dunks were breaking the internet every single week. Millions of people who didn't even watch basketball knew who Zion Williamson was. And then came Duke, the most watched college basketball player in years. Every game felt like an event. NBA players were out courtside. Celebrities were courtside. Tickets skyrocketed in price. And Zion somehow exceeded the hype. He averaged over 22 points per game while shooting nearly 70% from the field. That doesn't even sound real. He was bullying future NBA players like they were high school kids. And the thing people forget is, Zion wasn't just athletic. He was skilled. His touch around the rim was elite. His footwork was elite. His passing instincts were underrated. His second jump was maybe the fastest we've ever seen. Defensively, he had insane potential too. At that point, people genuinely believed he could become the best basketball player one day. But then came the first warning signs. In his preseason debut with the Pelicans, Zion looked incredible. And then injuries started. That would become the theme of his NBA career. A knee injury delayed his rookie season debut, but once he finally stepped on the floor, the league realized the hype was real. Zion averaged over 22 points as a rookie while barely even playing full minutes consistently. And he did it with absurd efficiency. He wasn't shooting a bunch of threes. He wasn't relying on fancy moves. He was simply overpowering everyone. Nobody could stop him from getting to the rim. Not centers, forwards, definitely not guards. It didn't matter. There were games where Zion looked physically stronger than the entire team. And the crazy part, he was still learning. And then came his second season. This was the year people forget about when discussing Zion, because statistically, it was superstar level. 27 points per game, over 60% shooting, first time All-Star. Do you understand how ridiculous that is? Very few players in NBA history have averaged 27 points on that level of efficiency, and Zion was doing it at just 20 years old. At that moment, the NBA world believed the Pelicans had their franchise superstar. People thought championships would eventually come, but behind the highlights, the concerns were growing. Conditioning questions, weight discussions, durability concerns, and eventually, everything started collapsing. The injuries became constant. Foot injuries, hamstring injuries, knee injuries. Season after season, Zion missed massive stretches of games, and fans started getting frustrated. Not because he wasn't talented, but because no one could actually see him play consistently. That's what made it painful. Every time Zion returned, he reminded everyone how dominant he still was, and then he'd disappear again. It became a cycle. Hope, dominance, injury, silence. Over and over again. The worst part about Zion's injuries is that they changed the conversation around him completely. At first, people debated whether he could become an MVP. Now, people debated whether he can even stay available long enough to matter. That's a brutal fall. And in today's NBA, availability is everything. You can be talented, you can be efficient, you can put up some insane numbers, but if you can't stay on the court, none of it matters. And unfortunately, for Zion, the criticism only got louder. People started questioning his work ethic. Former players discussed his conditioning on television. Analysts consistently talked about his weight. Photos of him went viral every offseason. Every appearance became a debate. Is he in shape? Does he care enough? Is he taking basketball seriously? And eventually, Zion became one of the most criticized young stars in the league. Some of that criticism was unfair, but some of it came from frustration, because fans know what he could have been. That's what makes this harder to watch than a normal bust. Zion is not a bust. Busts usually fail because they aren't good enough. Zion is clearly good enough when healthy. He's still one of the most dominant paint scorers in basketball. That's what makes this situation so heartbreaking. The talent is still there. You can still see flashes of greatness every time he steps on the floor. There are moments where he looks completely unstoppable. Moments where defenders bounce off him. Moments where he finishes through triple teams. Moments where he reminds everyone why he was compared to legends. But those moments don't last long enough anymore. And the NBA moves fast. New stars keep arriving. Victor Wembanyama, Anthony Edwards, Luka Doncic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. The league doesn't wait for anyone. While Zion was injured, an entire new generation started taking over basketball. And suddenly, Zion went from future face of the league to a giant what if. Think about how insane that is. At one point, many people thought Zion would become more marketable than almost every player in basketball. Now, people barely know what version of Zion they're getting from month to month. That unpredictability destroys momentum, especially for a superstar. The Pelicans organization also found themselves stuck in a difficult situation. Because what do you even do with a player like Zion? When he plays, he changes your entire franchise. When he's injured, everything stalls. You can't fully rebuild around him because he's too talented to give up. But you also can't fully trust him to stay healthy. That creates one of the hardest situations in sports. And honestly, it affects teammates too. Teams need stability. Chemistry matters. But Zion's availability consistently interrupting that process. Even when New Orleans started building a talented roster around him, injuries kept preventing them from fully reaching their potential. And eventually, people started wondering something uncomfortable. maybe Zion's playstyle itself is part of the problem, because the way Zion moves at his size almost feels unnatural, unreal. The explosiveness, the violent landings, the constant pressure on his knees and feet. Human bodies just aren't built to absorb that forever, especially at his weight. That's why so many people compare Zion to Derrick Rose in a way. Different players, different injuries, but similar sadness. Because with both players, you could see MVP level greatness early, and then injuries started stealing time away from them. The scary thing about injuries isn't just missing games, it's what they take mentally. Every rehab process changes players. Every setback adds frustration. Every return comes with pressure. And eventually, confidence can disappear too. People don't realize how exhausting constant injuries become, especially when the entire sports world is watching and criticizing you every day. And social media made everything worse for Zion. Every photo becomes viral. Every bad game trends online. Every injury becomes a meme. That level of pressure can crush players mentally. And despite everything, Zion has still shown flashes that make fans believe again. That's why this story refuses to die, because every time people are ready to give up on him, he comes back and dominates somebody. There are games where Zion still looks like one of the best athletes basketball has ever seen. Not current players, ever. That's why people still hold on to hope, because deep down, everybody knows the superstar version of Zion still exists somewhere. The question is, will we ever consistently see it again? And time is starting to matter now. There is no longer a young rookie with endless patience from fans. The NBA is brutal when it comes to reputation. Once people label you injury prone, that label follows you forever, fair or unfair. And Zion has reached the point where every injury feels bigger than the last. Every missed game becomes another headline, another debate, another disappointment. At some point, potential stops protecting you. Production becomes the only thing people care about. And Zion's story also represents something bigger about modern basketball. The pressure on young stars today is insane. People enter the league as brands now, as businesses, as billion-dollar investments. Before they even turn 20 years old, they're expected to carry franchises, dominate social media, and become global icons. That pressure can destroy people, and Zion entered the NBA with expectations almost nobody can realistically meet, especially while battling injuries. But here's the thing, the story isn't fully over. That's the crazy part, because despite all the disappointment, despite all the injuries, despite all the criticism, Zion is still capable of changing everything. He's still young enough to rewrite his career. We've seen players reinvent themselves before. We've seen careers recover. We've seen bodies transform. We've seen athletes silence doubters. The difference is, Zion has less room for mistakes now. The excuses are running out. The patience is running out. And the clock is moving faster than ever. At some point, potential has to become reality. Because if Zion can ever stay healthy for a full season, the NBA might actually remember how terrifying he is. But if the injuries continue, then this will go down as one of the biggest missed opportunities basketball has ever seen. Not because Zion lacked talent, but because the basketball world caught a glimpse of greatness and never got to fully experience it.